The pressure was certainly building under the Capitol dome this week in Texas politics. Let's get our headlines from our panel, and we'll start first with political analyst Karina Kling. Karina, what's your headline?
Let the threats of a special session begin.
Brad Johnson with the Texan News. What's your headline for the week?
Healthcare CEO gets doged.
And business analyst Annie Spillman. What's your headline for the week?
House Insurance Committee passes a bill that will show legislators the fiscal impact of any health coverage mandates.
We had a school choice unity gathering earlier in the week. It was spearheaded by the big three, Governor Greg Abbott, the Lieutenant Governor, and the House Speaker. And then later in the week, we had the Lieutenant Governor threatening to shut everything down and force a special session if some of his key bills didn't pass. Brad, did that catch you by surprise?
Yeah, on the press conference, I think the question is it a show of force for ESAs, or is it trying to bail out a sinking boat? I think it's probably the former. This was the first in-session press conference that the big three have had together since 2019, and I think that's pretty notable. They're all trying to get on the same page on most of these really big issues. On the others that Lieutenant Governor Patrick has threatened a special session on, the House is still in the ballgame on. It's just a question of what do these final policies look like. I don't think we'll reach that, but maybe that's just hopeful wanting.
Karina, posturing or panicking here?
Yeah, Rudy, I don't know that there's been a legislative session that I have covered, that you have covered since 2009, where there wasn't some kind of threat of a special session. So I guess posturing, I'll note, and as Dan Patrick has pointed out, only Governor Abbott can call a special session, but the Lieutenant Governor can force a special session by holding up some of these must-pass bills like the budget. And he knows how to do that. He's done it before in some circumstances, but he's wanting to get the THC ban on those products across the finish line, as well as bail reform. We've seen a little bit of pushback in the House, but as Brad mentioned, it's not anything that's going to potentially hold them up for good. We may just have to see some compromises made on some of these to get them over the finish line.
Annie, there's bad blood between the House and the Senate. This can't help.
Right, but like Brad said, I think it's a good sign that the big three they're having their breakfast together on a weekly basis. They're outwardly facing with their their press conference, and look, they agree on the school choice. I hear there's a deal on the property tax relief and reform package. Many of the governor's emergency items are playing out. Obviously, the lieutenant governor has items outside of the governor's emergency items that he's trying to hold a hard line on, like the THC ban. But look, if they're collectively going to tackle the water infrastructure, property tax, cybersecurity, ESA, teacher pay raise items, then it's going to be a really tough argument to bid for a special session for these extracurricular, items.
There were several interesting hearings that took place this week in Texas politics. One of the strangest happening in the House with the DOGE committee, the head of a Medicaid provider, Superior Health Plan, admitting that his company has hired private investigators to gather information on lawmakers, reporters, and even some policyholders. Thursday, the Attorney General announced an investigation into the practice. Brad, this sure was an unexpected pop in the session. What are you hearing about this now?
Yeah, absolutely. Nobody saw this coming. Even most of the members on the DOGE committee didn't know this was coming until Chairman Gio Capriglione brought it up, and it was pretty bipartisan. Everyone was taking whacks at this healthcare CEO for Superior Health. I think it is notable to point out that a healthcare company hiring a private investigator to look at, whether a claimant is lying or not, and their claim is not unusual. What is unusual is them looking into lawmakers, a couple reporters apparently, and people that aren't filing claims. And so there's going to be hell to pay on this. There already has been. The CEO has resigned, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot more fallout to this.
Andy, background checks and research, not uncommon. Leverage, that's something else. Is this a tempest in the teapot? Is this just a lot of smoke?
No, I don't think so. Look, I agree that it's not uncommon for companies to do their due diligence in certain matters, but to proactively, look into elected officials, especially when you know that you might be called to testify at some point, it doesn't look good, and especially when you've got sort of these major health plans that are under the microscope. But let me tell you, this is the whole purpose of this House DOGE committee, and it's working. Now, on the national level, there's a lot of bombastic talk and actions from Elon Musk and the president. So I think the general population has sort of blown off what's happening with the Doge committee on the national level. But it's set up to sort of look at any fraud, waste, and abuse, or things that maybe companies or agencies should or shouldn't be doing. So the purpose of this Texas House committee and what they're doing, they're at work and it's working. And the CEO paid its price, and the company might think twice about what actions they're taking.
Karina, do you agree? Is this the big moment for Doge on the Texas side?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as Annie and Brad mentioned, this is really what they are seeking to do and find all of this information out and what they can do to try and prevent it in the future. I'll note that there are a couple of House bills filed to prevent this issue from happening. Again, putting more transparency in place. And if you're going to get a government contract, that none of this is actually taking place as part of it as well. We're also seeing the parent company of Superior really trying to do damage control, the AG investigation, all of the Republicans, and really the bipartisan support on the investigation moving forward. So I don't think it's the end of it either.
This is for all of y'all. Could this play into the attack on cities and counties hiring lobbyists and using tax dollars? Does this play into that debate, Brad?
I I don't think it's the same issue. You know, TASB and TML and TAC, they're fighting off a different animal with this taxpayer fund lobbying ban bill. I think this is more about one specific company and how they've been conducting themselves. Even though it's maybe kind of similar in some threads, I think it's mostly different.
What do you think,
Yeah,
Corinne?
I agree. I don't think it's going to be, I think it'll be spinning some yarn if they try to use this. But, I do think that there are school districts specifically that legislators have had issue with and whom they contract with. So that might be held under a microscope.
It just seems, Karina, that this is going to be a recurring question as we get into these other things. Are you hiring private investigators to look into me? Right?
Yeah, I mean, that may be a question that's asked more commonly at committee hearings, which seems strange and pretty crazy to think about if that's something that we continue to have as a common practice moving forward, but maybe it's necessary.
Well, there were other big hearings that took place this week in Texas politics with some familiar topics coming up: tweaking the abortion law, modifying the red light camera ban to allow stop on cameras on school buses, legislation to rein in the governor regarding his veto power and what he can do during a crisis, and a bill to make Austin a district under state oversight. That bombed, literally bombed in committee, was shut down. Annie, what hearings caught your attention this week?
Well, first of all, anything kind of dealing with the governor's veto power, I don't think is going to go anywhere, because I think we all know that the governor doesn't yield much power in Texas except for his appointment power and his veto power. So that's going to stop very quickly. The hearing and the bill that caught my eye this week was one that had to do with property owners' rights regarding evictions. I know a lot of Austin local news covered that, but nationally over the last year, and especially after 2020, was legislation and dealings with evictions and property owners really facing burdensome and costly judicial eviction process and trying to regain possession of their rental properties from persons that really aren't entitled anymore to be on their property or remain in possession of their property. And you've seen this sort of all over the place. And I know that there's two sides to every story, and there's a lot of people that have really tried to make this kind of a sob story. Some people, they can't afford their rent anymore and they need to be able to stay in the apartment. But at the end of the day, there's other people that are paying their rent fairly and squarely. And so, the property owner deserves and has the right to be able to evict people. And so there's a process to that. So this legislation, this hearing, it became contentious, but at the end of the day, there's due process. And I believe that was on the Senate floor, but we'll see its way make it through the House. And I think we'll still see a lot of news coverage on this.
Karina, what were you tracking this week?
Yeah, I think one that got a lot of wide coverage was the hearing over a bill aimed at clarifying the state's abortion ban and the language in it. It does have bipartisan support. Doctors groups came out in favor of it and saying that it does clarify when doctors can intervene to save a pregnant woman's life. But we still heard a lot of tearful testimony from women, and particularly like quite a few of the women who sued the state over this law, for being able to clarify some of these exceptions to it and trying to get that passed, which we saw, or get that approved, which we didn't see go anywhere. They say it's still too vague, doesn't go far enough. For example, one of them pointing out that the bill does not include specific language about fetal anomalies, which was her case, and that she almost died from it. So I think we'll still see a lot of people testifying on this, but I don't know that any of it will change as it gets down the road. And there is this bipartisan support for at least something being done to put some more language and clarify some more language and clarifying language in place.
Brad, which was the big hearing for you this week?
I'm going to go off the reservation a bit and go with the hearing on Senate Bill 819. It's a lowest coal course bill relating to permitting requirements for renewable power generators. It sounds pretty niche. It is, but it's a very interesting political fight behind the scenes because you have conservationists on one side who want to kind of, restrict in some way where these things can go, not next to a national park or a state park. You don't want wind turbines disrupting the viewpoint. Then you add the wildlife aspect to this. And the other side, you've got environmentalists and the renewable generators who do not want this because in their mind it makes it harder to do business. And so you have this very interesting clash between these interest groups that are usually on the same side. And, I found it fascinating, and it might not get the most coverage in the state, but the legislature, and especially when they're in session, is rife with these kind of internecine fights going on.
Texas Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett's hardcore act on Capitol Hill had a foot in the mouth moment this past weekend. At a speaking engagement, she mocked Governor Greg Abbott, who is paralyzed, calling him Governor Hot Wheels. Karina, I typically say all this will blow over, but her verbal hand grenades have really gotten pretty strong. Certainly, this is going to play into her primary, maybe, and then a general election run by her opponents. Don't you think? Campaign ad fodder?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see that being the case moving on down the road. I will say she's in a safe Democratic district, so I don't know that it'll do much to move the needle in a general election. But I mean, Crockett's not one to water anything down. We've seen this from her in the past. We'll see it from her in the future. I know she did go on X and try to explain that she was referring to Abbott's policy of sending illegal immigrants or immigrants to Democrat-led cities who were in Texas illegally. But I think, it was an insensitive comment, as Republicans are blasting her for, and we'll see kind of what they do to try and use it against her. But I don't know that she's in unsafe territory for reelection. We'll see moving forward.
Brad, will there be political consequences?
I mean, she has that seat as long as she wants it. I saw on Twitter a lot of backing from right of center circles for the guy who's running against her as a Republican. He's got no shot. Just got no shot. That seat is I think a D75 district. So she has it as long as she wants. The question is, does she use this as a springboard to run for U.S. Senate in 26? Democrats are waiting to see who is going to take that mantle and run against either Cornyn, or if Paxton jumps in. Paxton, we'll see. Who knows how this shakes out. The other interesting thing I thought to this was, I don't think I've ever seen a 1980s, I think, John Candy movie reference brought into to justify a comment, planes, trains, and automobiles. It was a very clever, if she intended it, response in that light. And a great movie, by the way.
Certainly makes headlines, but Annie, moving legislation, does that hurt her and within groups wanting to try to get her to move legislation?
I'll be really honest. When she served in the Texas House, I don't think really it was ever about even moving legislation. Then she's typically been loud and outspoken, and that's why she was recruited to come to Texas, to run for the House seat at that time, and then ultimately her congressional seat. Has generally been about kind of the party movement and politics and really generating, younger voters. So I have never seen it in my experience with her that it's really been about policy over politics. It's been, politics over or policy. And hey, if that's what she's here for, to sort of generate sort of the younger voters, the more progressive voters, then she's doing her job.
Senator John Cornyn made it official. He is running for re-election. Cornyn was originally against Trump's return. He's gone full core MAGA now. Brad, is flipping by Cornyn getting any traction, or is he still in trouble big time?
I think it's clear he's in for a fight, regardless of who jumps in, whether it's Paxton or Wesley Hunt or Ronnie Jackson. Probably the most significant primary of at least his recent career. The question is, who gets the Trump endorsement? And clearly, the launch video, the way he fashioned it, talking about how he's, Trump's guy in the Senate, at least for this seat. He's angling for that Trump endorsement. It's the most powerful in Republican politics right now. And whoever gets that is going to be on the inside track, I think, to get this, to win this primary. The other factor working for Cornyn is he is a prolific fundraiser. And whoever jumps in is going to have to try and match that as much as they can. It's going to be a mountain of money coming in for the senior senator from Texas.
Analysts, Annie, I'm hearing a lot of analysts saying that this is going to be one of a record-breaking spending spree for the primary. What are you hearing?
Oh, I 100% agree with that statement, what Brad said. I mean, he's got the seniority, he's got a proven record, he's been whipped. He's held major positions in DC. He's shown his constituency that he's got influence in DC. And so, and he's always been a big fundraiser. People will put the money behind him. On the other hand, you've got the folks that have supported Paxton. He's constantly in front of potential voters. He's got that far right. And then you've also got the people that want to, quote unquote, drain the swamp and might want to see a new face in DC, and they think that Paxton might be that face. But keep in mind, Trump, had the choice to possibly bring Paxton up into the administration, and he did not. So that's kind of food for thought there.
Karina, this could really show the fracture within the party. Do you think that this kind of fight could do more harm than good?
I don't know. I mean, lest we forget back in 2022 when Cornyn was booed at the state convention. And so, I mean, he's faced his fair share of criticism with the conservative side of the Republican Party. It's going to be a tough primary for him, as Brad said, and as Annie said, no matter what, no matter who gets in, but particularly if it is against Ken Paxton. I mean, what Cornyn has going for him is the fundraising, his experience, his name recognition in the state. And I think, it's going to come down to who is Trump going to back in this. And Cornyn's smart to embrace him and see what he can do to use that to his advantage in moving forward. And we'll see, who else gets in and how tough a fight this does become.
Rudy, can I jump in on that for one more thing? We saw Lindsey Graham get the Trump endorsement in South Carolina. I think he and Cornyn are probably in this similar vein of the Republican Party in the Senate caucus, and if Lindsey Graham can get it, John Cornyn can absolutely get it. Just a matter of time to see.
We lost one tough grandma this week. Carol Keaton Strayhorn passed away. The former Austin mayor, state comptroller, railroad commissioner, and gubernatorial candidate, was a powerful political player in the state of Texas, and he was the business community saying about her accomplishments, for them.
I mean, listen, she was an unforgettable character, leader in the state of Texas for years, a true Austinite Texan. And, business leaders in this state worked with her when she was Texas comptroller. And as Texas comptroller, you're an independent watchdog over the state budget, right? And I don't think you can have anybody as independent as her. And, it's one of those. She was kind of the antithesis of a politician and really the epitome of an independent, tough watchdog. And so for the business leaders across the state, it's the ultimate loss. But it was one of those where when you talk to those that worked with her in the state, it's like, man, she was a pleasure to work with and one that will never be forgotten.
Karina, you and I both covered her while she was comptroller and then doing her race to try to unseat Rick Perry. Anything that you remember about her personality?
Yeah, I mean, I will say that I was not here yet for any of that, but ran into her post-political life several times, and she was a political trailblazer. And I'll also note she was the mother of 4 boys, and embrace that title, one tough grandma, because I think it does take a very tough person to be a mother of 4 boys. But she's been referred to as larger than life, and just even the encounters that I had with her, I saw that. and studied her political career and what she had done. And I think it was evident in her boys too, who all went on to really have, careers in public service in their own right. And we've seen that with them to this day.
Brad, anything that comes to mind with you and her legacy, and is it the fact that she did a formidable, even though it didn't fail, independent candidacy to run for governor?
Yeah, that's absolutely part of her story. I think broadly speaking, and this struck me with Gordon Johnson's passing too recently, the amount of history and institutional knowledge that goes away when someone like that, a Titan, passes away. Unless you wrote it down, it's lost history. You don't know. We'll never be able to truly hear about that stuff. All the crazy things that happened behind the scenes when deals were struck and campaigns were decided to be jumped into. All of that is just fascinating from my point of view, and I'm sure, unfortunately, there's some that we'll never hear about now.
You can see the full discussion that we've had on the Fox 7 YouTube page and on Fox Local, but let's wrap things up with one word for the week, and we'll start off with Karina. What's your word for the week?
Well, in honor of Carol Keaton Strayhorn, I'll say tough.
Brad, give me your one word. Brad, give me your one word.
In honor of the Doge situation, I'll make up a word and go with insuperior.
Annie, what's your word for the week? Annie, what's your word for the week?
Well, I was going to say, in honor of March and Texas politics, madness.
And that is this week in Texas politics.